Hey everybody, this is Todd Brandon, the Accidental Excellist. Thanks for tuning into the video here. In this video, I wanted to show you how to create a macro to highlight cells. So like if you had a worksheet here and you select a cell, we want to be able to highlight that cell with a different backfill color and even a different border color. And this kind of arose out of a question somebody asked me about, and I went back to work on it. Realized how simple this is. It's actually only about, I don't know, like 2 or 3 lines of code, but it's kind of a cool segue out of your typical macro where you create the macro within a module. This is actually a workbook event, and so I wanted to show you how to do that. And what that means is, instead of you having to manually run a macro or click a button, or like here I have an automation tab where I have some add-ins and macros that I have to click something to run it. In this case, what we're talking about is an event, a workbook event, which means like if I click another cell, it automatically runs that procedure. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to Alt F11 to get to our Visual Basic editor. So I'm going to find this workbook and I'm going to double click, and when I do, I get this blank slate here, this blank code window. And up here with these 2 drop downs, I want to go up here in the one that's on the left, and I want to select workbook. And then when I do that, this selection changes over here automatically to workbook open. It's just a default behavior of Microsoft Excel. But if you go here, you've got all kinds of events that you can select and you can work with. So, you could select an event that's, run before you save, after you save, before you close, before you print, all these things. What I need to find though is sheet selection change. Here it is. So sheet selection change. I'm in workbook, so if I click on sheet selection change, I get this private sub workbook sheet selection change. And we'll talk about this in a second while I remove this. I don't need that. So what this is if you've ever worked with a macro before, you've probably seen something like where you just type the name, some macro, and then you put the double parentheses, and when you close that parentheses, it automatically adds that in the sub. So you got these parentheses with nothing in it. It just means it doesn't have any arguments. It's similar to if you've worked with, Excel formulas where you have to supply arguments to the formula. That's what this is. In this case, for sheet selection change, there are automatic arguments that are supplied to this, canned function, if you will. And so what this means is, for our purposes, we're not going to use the sh object argument, but we are going to use the target argument. And what that means is, we'll use this keyword, and target is actually the range or cells that we select when we select with our cursor with our mouse, and that goes back to sheet selection change. So these ByVal terms are what's called passing mechanisms, and in Visual Basic you have 2 of these. You can either be ByVal for by value, or it can be ByRef, by reference. In this case, it just uses by value. It's really above the scope of this video, this little tutorial. Just know that this target here is a keyword. This argument is going to be a keyword that we're going to use. I'll supply a link to more information about that in the description below. So moving on, what we'll do is we're going to use this target keyword. All right, so now I'm going to use that target keyword to get us started here. And because it's a keyword, you can notice here when I hit the dot, it gives me this drop down. It's IntelliSense for showing all the available methods and properties for this. In this case, we're going to use the interior property. And notice these items here with the little sheet with the hand. These are the icons for a property. These little green objects, looks like they're moving, like flying across from left to right, are methods. So anyway, we're going to select interior. Once I see it highlighted, I can just hit tab. It'll auto-complete that for me. And then I'm also going to use another property here, color index. So you can do this a couple different ways. We're going to do it with color index. And so there you have it. So what this is saying is the target, which would be whatever selection we make with a mouse click, we want to do something to the interior property, and that's going to be the color index of that interior. And so what we need to do now is make that equals some number. What's cool about this, there's a ton of different numbers for different coloring indexes in VBA. And so there's a whole ton of these to choose from for our cell interior color. And I found a really cool site that gives you some perspective on that. And I'll put the URL for this in the description below. It's just access-excel.tips. You can see here it's kind of a cool list of all the color value or color index values with their appropriate colors, so you can kind of choose from something. So if you wanted to come over here and play with different color indexes, you could do that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to select 42 for our interior. So let me save that. Control S. So in this case, I'm going to use index 42 for like a light blue. I'm going to save those changes. And now let me go back to the actual workbook, and this should work. So note there, when I click on that cell, it automatically turns that blue, which is our color index 42. Now, if I wanted to go back, let's say we want to select this index 7, that's a pink. Let me go back to my code. Now I can go back and select 7. I'm going to save that, Control S, go back to my workbook, and now here if I highlight something or I select a cell, it turns that pink. So pretty cool. The other thing that you want to note is that, like I said before at the beginning of the video, this is a selection-based macro. So if I select an entire column, it's going to highlight that entire column. If I select a row, it's going to highlight that entire row. Again, it's about selection, so if I select this range here, it's going to highlight that range. So let's do something else here. In fact, if I open up another sheet, this is a workbook sheet selection change, so it's across the entire workbook. So no matter what sheet you're on, no matter if you add new sheets or whatever, it's still going to work. Let me show you now how to add a border color change to this. Let's go back to the code. And in this case, let me go down to a new line. I'm going to use target again, but I'm going to use a different property. This is going to be borders. And be careful, it's not border, it's borders. And then dot color index again. And so find color index. And now we'll do equals. And let's do 42. And I'm going to comment this out. I don't know if you're aware if you can do this or how you can do this. It's just a single quote. Comments the code out, turns it green. That means it doesn't run. So we'll isolate this to being just a change in border color. I'll click save, or I'm sorry, Control S to save. Go back and note here that when we select cells, it changes the border color to that blue color index 42. And again, it will do that for all borders within a range, and then also for the entire column or the entire row. Oh, it's a little hard to see. We could have used a different color. Can go back, make that pink color, I guess, would be a little easier to see. And there you go. So pretty cool. And then you can also combine the two. Obviously, if I uncomment this out, let's make this 42 for the sake of contrast. And hopefully this looks good. Again, Control S to save that. And now I can select that entire range, and you've got pink borders and blue fill. So this video has gone way longer than I intended it to, but it's kind of a cool, fun little exercise in VBA, and it really doesn't take that many lines of code, as you can see. And then, you know, for those of you who have, maybe you're familiar with macros in general, but you've never worked with a workbook event, this is kind of a cool segue into that, I guess, if you will. And then you can see it's really pretty simple. It's just 2 lines of code. So anyway, I hope you had fun with that. Again, I will leave those links in the description below for you if you'd like to find out more about ByVal and ByRef, and then also to get those color index chart. So there you go. Thanks everybody for watching. Please take a minute to like and subscribe, and be sure to check us out at theaccidentalexcellist.com.